What's the one thing that all great writers have in common? They all learn from their mistakes. Whether you're full-time, part-time, or just starting out, this Great Writers Learn miniseries will give you a behind-the-curtains look at two independent authors and the struggles they've faced along the way. You can shortcut the success of your career by learning from their blunders. Welcome to Great Writers Learn, with your hosts, best-selling authors Daniel Willcocks and John L. Monk.
Hello and welcome to Rights and Wrongs, a Great Writers Learn mini-series in which we explore the behind the scenes of author craft, take a retrospective look at some of the biggest mistakes that we've made, and share fundamental lessons learned so that you can learn from our errors and accelerate your author career. My name's Daniel Willcocks, and with me every single week is the one and only John L. Monk. Today we're going to be exploring the topic of genre hopping. So John, tell us, what is genre hopping?
Genre hopping is when you're writing in horror and you wrote a book. And then you say, I think I'll write a fantasy. And you write a fantasy. I'm going to write a thriller. And you write a thriller. And you end up writing in all these different genres. And it presents some good things and some bad things. You hope, I don't know. I don't know what you're hoping for. Maybe you're just hoping to get rid of the boredom or the hopelessness. Maybe you're doing it for the challenge. What do you think? Why do you think people genre hop?
So I'll speak from my own personal experience. Genre hopping, I think there's an element of a switch in creativity. So, there's always a shiny new object. You might be really into your first book and suddenly think, maybe this genre is not right for me, and jump into a completely different one just to try your hand at that. It could be that, you're not selling well and you think, okay, maybe my success lies elsewhere. For some people, it's just a case of, I think you mentioned on one of the previous episodes that genre hopping for you is satisfying because you're trying different things and you're getting to experience different genres firsthand. So, there are lots of different reasons that people can do it, because I think it's slated often as a very, very negative thing. And again, it comes back to one thing that we have spoken about, which is if you know what it is that you're trying to get out of your writing career, then genre hopping might be the way to go for you. If you're looking at just creatively satisfying yourself, playing in lots of different things, it's not necessarily always the bad thing that people make it out to be.
Yeah. For example, just going purely from the good side, you can learn what you're good at. You can learn what it is you like. Maybe you like reading fantasy, but man, you hate writing it because of all the world building. Maybe it's easier for you to just write a world that it's been blasted to hell by nuclear weapons or something like that. So you end up writing post-apocalyptic. But it can also be harmful. You write a series of romance novels and suddenly you're writing post-apocalyptic, and then people maybe they don't cross over. So you find yourself in a situation where you're not getting that funnel that you need. The whole idea of a funnel where you've written, 50 books in fantasy, and then people are just going through each one. They're not going to hop over to your romance and from there to your spy thriller,
No, absolutely. And I think for some people, there's an element of maybe you're writing to market and maybe you're looking to try and make money in a different genre that sells much better than what you're doing. Speaking from my own experience, and I actually spoke about this on my other podcast, Next Level Authors, pretty recently, which is my experience with, I started my journey with a horror novella. And then I met up with the guys that I write with at Hawk & Cleaver, and we started the Other Stories podcast, which is a fiction podcast primarily centered around horror. Somewhere down the line, and I have no regrets because I love the process of it, but somewhere down the line I ended up going into post-apocalyptic fiction. And then a bit further on from that went into what was essentially a post-apocalyptic /YA /sci-fi /paranormal mix of things that sold really well, but I think I was one of the lucky ones there. And now I'm back to basically diving into horror. And I guess the reasons for my genre hopping down the line was an element of opportunity. It was an element of finding where I wanted to sit as a creative, as an author. I love my post-apocalyptic books. I really do. But what I've discovered is after trying all these different things, I've now realized that my heart is in horror. They're the books that I read. They're the books that I want to write. But if I hadn't have gone through that other journey of writing these other books in different places, then I might not have reached that conclusion so quickly. And I could have gone into 1,000 other different genres just to see where the success lay. And now I'm settling my roots and placing all my chips in horror.
Yeah, so that was a really good exercise for you. And not only that, but even though you were writing in other genres, every time you put down a word, that's practice. And in your case, you came out with it, learning what it is where you really belonged. Sometimes you have to journey away from home to find out that you really just want to be at home. You know?
And it loops back to our genre expectations conversation, because in learning what other genres needed, you also then are more able to tell the differences between the genres that you're passionate about and other genres, and the things that you like and the things that you have to hit.
Let me ask you a question. When it comes to genre hopping, what do you think about pen names? Use them, don't use them?
So it's a very, very difficult question to ask. I think, in my opinion, and this is totally my opinion, is that it depends on how varied those genres are. What I've tried to do is, with my fiction, label it under dark fiction as opposed to saying I'm a horror author. Although I am going more into I'm a horror author, to collect everything that I've worked together, because there's always been an element of darkness in them. I've labeled that as dark fiction. So I'm happy having my name across all of those products. Whereas if I was, going into, we'll use romance as an example again, or we'll use romance. If I was to go suddenly into romance, I would very, very likely take on a pen name, because not only does Amazon try and push the books that are selling to particular readers, and if you suddenly go from writing a horror book to writing a romance book, some of their algorithms will take that latest release and push it towards the people who have made you the most money for Amazon. You're also more than likely to confuse other readers and potentially disappoint them. If there's someone waiting for you to finish a book in your series or to complete your next book, and they suddenly see that you've released a romantic comedy and spent the time doing that, then they might be a little disappointed and think, oh, why aren't you putting the effort into pleasing me, the selfish reader?
Yeah, I kind of went into that quite a bit. So I wrote the Jenkins cycle, and the people who've read the Jenkins cycle really like it, as a general rule. They're always asking me, you're going to write more? I wrote 3 books in it, which I thought was pretty solid place to stop, at least for a while. It's designed I can write more. The Hell's Children books, it's actually called This Dark Age, but I just know the first book is Hell's Children, and I would say that. It has 2 books in it, and we've talked about it before on another podcast, that it's like really hard to write because you're writing a kind of dark subject that I don't want it in my head too much. But when they start getting emails saying, hey, buy my lit RPG, and in their mind they're thinking, why isn't there 3 books? Why can't you write more of these books? They're still kids. They're going to grow up, right? Maybe they're not too happy, right?
That's the thing. I don't think readers aren't patient to the plights of the author and the satisfaction of the creative well. I think one of the biggest public examples I've seen of that is George R.R. Martin finishing the Game of Thrones books, because I remember, like, I'm a big fan of the TV show. I've read a couple of books. I'm not one of these ravenous people looking for the next book. But I remember seeing that he'd released other works in the space of people waiting for this book to be completed, and the rage that brought out of those readers who wanted the next book. But he was working on other things, and it's not that you can't work on other things. I think there's just an element of you're promising the reader that you're writing a particular thing, and particularly if you're selling them on that premise, you're selling them as what insert genre here, author. They're going to want to receive that kind of content from you because they like your writing in those particular stories.
Yeah, readers are sort of like really awful house guests. They don't really know that you can't keep screaming at them to dance, monkey, dance. Give me my books.
Yes.
It was a surprise to me to hear from Jim Butcher or Patrick Rothfuss that they really get sick and tired of readers constantly demanding books from them.
It's very entitled, but that's a separate conversation. How talk us through a little bit about your journey of genre hopping.
Right. So I wrote this series called The Jenkins Cycle, and they were my first books. It was kind of like the story that was kind of burning to get told, your first book, and it was sort of I would say it was dark fiction. Yeah, it's a little supernatural. very much crime and murder mystery with romance and, lots of other things that were very difficult to market because it wasn't any one thing, it was many things. And, that's the case. So then I decided, okay, well, why don't we write something that you want to write? Yes, but is very identifiable that people could quickly type something into a search bar and get a list of books that match what I'm going to write. You could say I was writing to market before I heard the term writing to market. And I wrote Hell's Children, which is a post-apocalyptic book about the world going to hell. Now, where genre hopping kind of comes in is obviously, yes, I genre hopped. But one thing that did not happen was the people who liked Hell's Children did not, and it sold very, very well. I think I made, for me, well. Okay, other people, not so well, like Lindsay Brooker, no. But me, I think I made $25,000 in like the first 3 months, which was huge for me.
Incredible.
Because I had not sold like that with, the kick from the Jenkins cycle. But all those people that were buying, Hell's Children and leaving good reviews, they did not jump over and read the Jenkins cycle. And likewise, the people who read the Jenkins cycle were like, yeah, we just really want the Jenkins cycle books. We're not really interested in this post-apocalyptic stuff. And I don't see right now with this lit RPG series, yet another genre hop, people kind of going to the other books. The reasoning behind my genre hop the first time, I think, was obviously I wanted to sell more books. And oddly enough, and you're going to think, well, obviously the reason why he's genre hopping the second time is for more money. More money can also be true, but really post-apocalyptic, the series that I was writing is just very, very hard on my soul. It's about kids in a world where lots and lots of guns and ammunition, no parents. Everybody, all the adults have died. And I tend to write realistically, and we both know how realistic humans would be in an unsupervised world where, muscle kind of makes the rules,
Yes. So
that kind of thing was very hard on the soul. And I was thinking, I don't want to write that, but I also don't want to go back to Kick because it's not going to make me any money. I had screwed around with, I wrote an erotica book, which I thought was a really enjoyable experience. I used a pen name. It was an enjoyable experience in the sense that I got to exercise different parts of my brain. It's getting nasty. Anyway, you get the idea. It's it's kind of a challenge. So that's another reason to genre hop is if you want a challenge. But going into lit RPG, one could say I was writing to market. But as I said, that can also be true. The very first book I ever tried to write was about a person who goes into a virtual world where magic could work inside of a computer system. And that was back in the late 90s. So I'd always had this story burning in me. And I gave up on it because The Matrix came out. And I was like, no one's going to they're going to think I'm ripping off The Matrix. And I just gave up on it. So, it has to be in you. I don't just follow the money. I can follow money and have that also be true. There's other reasonings. And I think in the last two cases, post-apocalyptic, lit RPG, it's paying off creatively and monetarily.
Yeah. I think you hit a good point there, which is if you are going to genre hop, you still have to love or know the genre enough to write it and write it well. And I don't think that genre hopping is all doom and gloom. I think, like you say, you found success of varying kinds in two different genres. I'm doing okay in the genre that I'm working in after working in other genres. There are some other people that, people listening to this, if you want to check out other interviews on The Great Writers Share, including Michael Anderle does very well hopping across different genres of varying types. People like Michael Brent Collins, who he surprised me. He jumps across to a lot of different genres and makes quite a good career out of it because it fills him creatively, and he's in a position where it's earning him well. So it can be done. I think you just have to be very deliberate. And I think one thing that people automatically think is going to happen, and it's something that I see a lot, is people look at Stephen King, who can make his name the genre, and
Yes.
dive straight into trying to make that happen. Because obviously Stephen King's done, things from Shawshank Redemption to Pet Sematary to the Mr. Mercedes series, and they hop across blending all different genres. But unless you're Stephen King, the chances are that's probably not going to happen, at least not straight away for you. So don't put all of your money into trying to make that your mainstay as a career, and try and, in my opinion, I think you should at least try and do well mining at least one genre that you're happy with to start with.
Yeah, there's definitely, be careful the first thing you pick, maybe. It's good that if you're listening to this podcast, this is the podcast I would have wanted to listen to before I wrote Kick.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And like I say, it's my journey. It's taken me 4.5 years to get to a point where I'm solid on the genre that I want to write in. And, again, I'm going to plug a previous episode, listen to an interview I did with TMW Ashford, where we talk about his experience and my experience in writing across different things for 4 or 5 years, but not seeing that time as time wasted, seeing that time as time in which you've invested in learning, in which you know more about yourself, and you can confidently then go forward into a genre that you want to excel in. So it's all learning. Nobody ever does it right first time. And I think sometimes you have to, like you say, you have to leave home to realize how much you appreciate it in the long run.
Yeah, that was very wise of me when I said that. Yes.
It was incredibly poignant. Awesome. Do you have any more points on genre hopping?
Yeah, here's one. When you're going to genre hop, don't, give it a good go. Write a couple of books in the genre and then move to the next genre. Don't write one book. Oh, that didn't sell. Then you write a horror, one book, that didn't sell. Yes. Post-apoc. Yeah. That's my last tip.
No, you're doing yourself a massive disservice if you do. You have to give it a chance. You have to at least try and make something happen.
That's right.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this episode. Thank you to Jon for keeping me company. And if you've got your own lessons or cautionary tales regarding genre hopping that you're dying to share, then you can head on over to patreon.com/greatwritersshare, or leave a comment at facebook.com/groups/greatwritersshare, or tag us with #greatwriterslearn. Join us next time when we'll be exploring the rights and wrongs of author brand. And thank you again, Jon, for keeping me company.
You know how I love doing that, so no problem.
Cheers. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Great Writers Learn miniseries, Rights and Wrongs. If you're looking for even more content created specifically to boost your creative well and accelerate your author career, then head on over to www.patreon.com/greatwritersshare and get involved in the community. Don't forget to also check out the Great Writers Share podcast, where you can eavesdrop on conversations with some of today's most prolific and generous writers as I tease out the tips, tricks and strategies that they use to make a living from their writing. Just search for Great Writers Share in your podcatcher to get started today. Until next time.